Welcome to Epic Begins with One Step Forward, the podcast that reveals how to plan, achieve, and enjoy the journey of creating epic results in your life, business, health, and relationships. Here's your host, best-selling author and motivational speaker, Zander Sprague.
Hello, Epic people, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward. I'm your host, Zander Sprague, and today I am so excited to welcome Jessie Torres to be my guest. Jessie, tell us who you are and what you do.
Hello, Zander. Thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. And as you said, my name is Jessie Torres. I consider myself a peak performance coach and just life strategist. And I really enjoy, I believe, helping people. I believe that my mission is to help awaken and to reconnect with our true essence and to heal within so that we can be the best versions of ourselves. And so I think that in a world of tons of mindset, we are knowing our way out of healing. And so I think it's important for us to take a look at some of the things we need to heal are actually our superpowers waiting.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. One of the things I know that you and I share, unfortunately, is that we're both sibling survivors, meaning we've both lost at least one sibling. And I am sorry for your loss. I lost my sister 27 years ago, coming up on 28 next month.
Wow. Sorry to hear that.
But it is sort of a unique experience. And certainly there are lots of people who have also experienced that. And yet, I believe a lot of people don't actually work their way through the grief. They don't know how to heal from that. So my question for you is, how have you been working your way through healing yourself from the loss of you lost two brothers, I believe.
I did. Well, it's interesting, Zander. It's taken time because I lost my older brother 30 years ago and my little brother as soon as 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It'll actually be 2 years tomorrow. And when my older brother died, it was definitely, I mean, it's always a shock, of course, but it's one of those things. It was a murder. So it's one of those things that you read about, you watch movies over, you don't expect to happen to you, and he was such a good man. You kind of go crazy with trying to figure out what happened and I remember that I was raised Catholic, I was then Christian, and now I consider myself more spiritual than I do religious. But at that time, I turned my back on everything, like God, universe, whatever.
Sure.
I was like, I don't know if you exist, God. You know what? I don't know if maybe we just get buried under 7 feet, right? With worms crawling out of our eye hole. I mean, I was really upset, right? And I thought, if there is a God, then I hate you for taking my brother. And that's the energy that I was holding at the time. I didn't know how to process it back then. I just knew that this wasn't supposed to happen in my definition, right?
And I can say that I too am a victim of homicide. My sister was also murdered. So
you understand the shock factor.
Absolutely. And as I say, as I say all the time when I'm talking about it, there were many things I thought I would deal with in my life, but murder really was not one of them. It just wasn't. Like, I mean, I remember when my dad called to tell me, like, it was literally kind of like on the computer, the 404 not found. Like, I just had I couldn't process that. And I too, I'm not a particularly religious person, but yeah, there was a whole lot of why did this happen? It's way too soon. This chapter is ended so prematurely. So
to answer your question, I don't know about you, but what ended up shifting for me, as you asked me how I processed through it. So it was a moment of massive grief. And I remember at the time, my ex-husband, he was holding me and I was crying, and over his shoulder, I saw my brother. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's standing there in white, and there is white behind him. It looked like people, but you know how it's kind of distorted. It's a feeling more than it is what you're seeing, right?
Yeah.
And it was all white and beautiful. He just did with his hand, he just gestured and he said, Jess, everything is as it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know what it meant then, but I knew it gave me calm. I
Yep.
knew it brought me to peace. I knew he was in a good place. And from there, there's all kinds of things that have happened in my life journey since then, but I've been on a quest of finding my own connection to what, is God, source, universe, or whatever this place is that we go to when we leave our human suit.
Yeah.
And fast forward now, of course, my own transformation, my divorce, that was very, very tumultuous and scary. And, after 18 years of, verbal, mental, emotional abuse, coming to a place of apathy, wishing my own death, and to come out of that in a desire to understand humanity, because at that point it was an act of kindness that actually woke me up. I call it another short circuit moment. And I didn't even know what to call it. I just knew, I don't know. I had come to such a place of like, if this is life, I don't want to be here. But
Right.
my kids saved me from taking my own life. And when these people behaved kindly, it created a short circuit that said, I don't know what this feeling is, but if this feeling's available, then life is worth living.
Yeah.
And what it did is it catalyzed my decision to then leave my current situation, which, by the way, I'm grateful for my ex-husband. I'm grateful for my father. Like, it's all good. I understand the divine order of it all. At least my belief system is I trust that everything happens for our highest and greatest good, even the suck. And if I look at that, when my little brother passed away 2 years ago, I mean, I went into rage, which I don't typically go to rage. I go to sadness. But here I was just like, no, like I already checked the box. I already lost a brother, like did that, like this is not meant to happen. And so I'm always asking, God, here, if both of my brothers are meant to be taken, then what do you want with me?
Right.
Right? How do and part of what I do is find the light in the darkest moment. Right? I
Definitely.
help alchemize our pain into something beautiful or into power and into purpose. And so I thought, oh, the memo or the answer was, Jesse, you have to eat your own medicine. And so now, because I had cultivated these tools, I had come to a place where even in my deepest sorrow, I was able to find the light. I was able to find the beauty and the magnificence of life, which is polarity. We get both. We don't know light without dark. We don't know positive without negative. And so it's magnificent in its gut-wrenching pain. I could now connect to the depth of my pain was equivalent to the depth of my love. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I talk all the time when I'm talking with other sibling survivors. I tend to talk to a lot of parents who've lost a child and stuff.
Mhm.
And I just remind people that when you've experienced a loss, celebrate the rainbow that was that person's life. My sister was 30 years old. I was 28. My younger sister was 25 when my sister was killed. We should, I've, not that I remember the first couple of years of life with my sister, but there's all these wonderful things that I can hold on to and that I can celebrate versus just focusing on that dot. And I think
Right.
a lot of times people just are so focused on I lost my sister, I lost my brother, uh, my marriage ended, my whatever. You're right. There is light and there is dark.
Mhm.
There is the sun, there is the moon, all of these things. And another thing that you brought up, and I think it's really important, and especially when we're on whatever our epic journey, I like to call what you and I experienced the epic unexpected, because it is
Yeah.
an epic journey. It's not
Yeah.
one that we would choose to go on, but here we are, so might as well make the best of it. But there's choice. Every day
Mhm.
I have a choice whether I want to talk about Lucy or not. And there's a lot of power. I think there's so much power with what goes on in our life. It can either, we can either have it define us or we can define it. And I choose to define my loss and do some work. And I'm a little busier because I got some work to do for Lucy. You're a little busier because you're probably doing some work for your brothers. And
Mhm.
that's beautiful and awesome.
Well, I think that's such a great point. I believe that we're always at choice point, but society teaches us to hold on to a victim story, right? Because the more that we hold on to the victimization of like, hey, I'm a victim of this thing, the more that we embrace our limitations, the sicker we get, and so on and so on. I don't want to get into the
Absolutely.
political conversation, but you know what? They make more money if we're sick, right? And so from that, it's like we have a choice. And, it's like coaches will say, your past doesn't equal your future. And I disagree with that. It absolutely can, but we're not taught to grab the good, to your point, right? It's like, when I went through abuse with my father, when I think of a little girl having to build traps to warn her when her dad was coming into his room,
Yeah.
I can think about that and go, wow, that's tragic, that I had to do that. It didn't always stop him, but it somehow comforted me to know he was coming. And that seems tragic. And that is true. But what I also see is a little girl that was resourceful, a little girl that was resilient, a little girl that was courageous. And
Right.
I didn't know that I was going to need all those tools when I got my divorce, right? But I was building and cultivating them. And that is also true. This one disempowers me and makes me feel pain. And this one empowers me and helps me fall in love with the aspects of me that got back up. Both are available, but we're not taught to seek it. So I always say you got to look for the gift in your pain, because if you don't, you will only remember the pain.
Absolutely. And another thing, years ago I was doing a coaching course and we had to read lots and lots of books. And it's funny how when you're doing that, you hold on to just one little piece of like, a 200 or 250 page book, but it doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
As long as you walk away with something. And it was talking about Buddhism and actually in the diamond industry, and it was very interesting. But the thing that I pulled away from it was that in Buddhism, there's this belief that things are not inherently good or bad. It's how we interpret it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's take something like the sun being out. Okay, most people are like, "Yay, the sun is out. That's a great thing." But if I'm a farmer and there's a drought, maybe I see the sun being out as being a bad thing. But inherently, the sun being out is not good or bad. It's how I choose to see
Right.
what that is. In our own life, the things that happen to us. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that happens it's not fair. It stinks. It's not what we would choose, but how we choose to deal with whatever's going on. You're right. We are all so much more resilient than we are told that we are.
Mm-hmm.
That victim story, you're right. There's so many people I work with who it's about the victim story. It's me trying to encourage them to say, you don't have to buy into that, right?
Right.
Uh, I'll give a perfect example. I wrote my first book and sat on it for 5 years because I had nothing, I had all kinds of feedback through school that I wasn't a good writer. So I didn't believe I was a good writer. And I told people I was coming out with a book, but I really wasn't because I was doing nothing for it to come out. It's not like, oh, I'm waiting for them to publish it.
Right.
But I get tired of hearing myself say that. So I put the book out. And it was a book for other sibling survivors. And an amazing thing happened, Jesse. People started telling me that they liked the book and it was helpful. And it was
Mm-hmm.
shocking to me. Why? Because the story I was telling myself was, I'm not a writer. I'm not a good writer.
Right.
Surprisingly, I seem to be a pretty good writer.
Well, I think it's also important to share our story. You don't need to be a good writer to connect with somebody,
Oh,
right? It's
absolutely
to be
not.
able to influence, to be able to connect at the heart level. And I'm sure your book was very heartfelt, from your experience and what you want to offer as service to people. It's like we don't do a service by holding back. We don't. I had a similar experience, and I felt an energy, whether it was God, Christ, it felt like a Christ energy, but I was coaching, and I was like in my own, oh, who am I to say this thing? Who am I to blah, blah, blah. Right. And I had this voice that came down and grabbed my face and said, you need to speak, you need to write, you need to express. Everything you say is me through you. Let me. And I was like, whoa, like I'm getting in my own way. Like I need to get out of the way and allow, right, what's coming through, because I believe all of our adversity has given us a muscle. And I actually have this written right here on my desk that says, let me, so
Yeah.
that I get out of the way and I just allow what is coming through to come through. Because one of the greatest gifts I've gotten, excuse me, was a gift from a lady back when I was working in corporate. We went to lunch together and I was sharing some of my story or whatever. And she just like, wow, like, can I write that down? And then we ended the lunch with, where do I leave my $10 copay? And I was like,
Yeah.
what happened? What just happened? You know what I mean? And I remember I walked away more inspired than her, because I was like, wow, if there's something in my journey or something in my storytelling that allowed her to see a different version of herself or woke her up to be inspired, I'm like, holy cow, I found gratitude for every part of my experience in that moment. From my
Absolutely.
dad's abuse to my husband's abuse to my brother dying, like all of it, to my mom not listening, like it was all there. Gratitude was waiting for me. I didn't know. And that's one of the things, is that I think we have a society that don't know. We have high achievers, we have people that are getting momentum, but they don't know why they're stuck. And they don't realize that where they're stuck has a tie into a trauma moment when they were young, right? And
Yeah.
I go through the three pillars of trauma, which are undiagnosed trauma, unacknowledged trauma, and unresolved trauma.
Yeah.
And I mean, people will say, no, I had a great upbringing. My mom and dad were great. They're still married. It's awesome, right? But here's the thing. In the human experience, we all create meaning, like you were saying, right? Like we are meaning making machines just in being a regular human. It doesn't mean you have to have had abuse. Trauma, I define it as what the child made meaning of in the moment of the experience or when
Yeah.
safety was lost. Right. So if a child is going to the grocery store with his mother and he's playing in the aisle, mom goes to the end of the aisle to grab something. She can see him, but he can't see her. He lifts up his head and screams for mom. She's like, I'm right here. It was seconds. But that child in his unconscious conditioning said, I could be left behind. I could be
Right.
abandoned. Right.
Yeah.
So now when mom walks out the door, he's clingy, he cries, they don't understand what's wrong because no abuse.
Yeah.
She didn't do anything wrong.
No.
Right. But now the guy's 35 and he doesn't know why he can't keep a relationship, why
Right.
he's insecure, why he's controlling. Right. And it all comes back to that moment. And so we don't know to know. We're not taught. But that's why I love that you're doing this show, because again, it helps us see through a different set of lenses that we weren't taught to use.
Absolutely. And I believe that we all have epic things that we want to do, be it write a book, start a podcast, run a marathon, start your own business, travel somewhere, right?
Mhm.
And all too often we all say, "Oh, well, someday I want to do this, or I'd love to go here, I'd love to do that." But we don't, because we, in our own mind, we make it difficult, or we worry that we don't have all the steps.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is that epic does begin with one step forward. And oftentimes that step is not nearly as hard as we thought. So, for example, you were telling that story of in the corporate world of having lunch with that woman.
Mm-hmm.
That for you was probably this step of, oh, look, people are interested in my story and I can help people. Wow. What a moment, like what a moment. And yet that step probably did not feel nearly as momentous as if you said, let me set up a meeting so that I can try and do it. And we
Right.
tend to make things much more difficult than they actually have to be.
Yeah, very much. Very
And
much.
and stuff. One of the things I love to ask my guests, Jessie, is I in my book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward. It's this concept of not yet. And I love not yet because I think it's so powerful, because there are things that we're doing that take time.
Mm-hmm.
So we haven't finished it. So maybe you're writing a book. Has your book come out? Not yet. Doesn't mean it's not going to, but if you say no, it's such a hard stop.
Right.
So what are one or two of your not yets? Those things that maybe you dream of doing, or you're just sort of like, I want this.
Oh, that's so funny. You actually nailed it. It's my book.
Okay.
So I started writing my book years ago, actually. And what I realized is that it was a not yet, because who I am today is years, light years from when I first started it. So
Definitely.
it was actually not meant to be written then. It's meant to be written now. And so I'm actively working on that to make that happen. And I just thought, oh, that was perfect, because it was a not yet back then. Now it's a, I need to get it done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. No, well, that's great. And congratulations on working on the book. I know it's an arduous process. I sometimes, what I like to say is, the creation of the book is challenging, but what's more challenging is actually the editing of the book. I know when I got, my books, by the time I got done proofreading them and they finally got published, I was sort of like, I prefer not to actually see my own book for about, a month, since I just spent the last,
Right.
the last like 2 months reading my full book like 7 or 8 times. I'm tired of my own words for a
Right.
moment. I love what I wrote, but I'm kind of like, I have read this chapter so many times. So it's a very unique and fun process. Well, Jessie, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. What you shared is just so beautiful and wonderful. I love the work you're doing.
Thank
How
you.
can people find you?
They can go to iamfiercegrace.com. Fierce Grace is the name of my company, and it is my mission in life, to help awaken and heal the essence within, and to help you be the best version of you so that you can serve humanity and love it forward.
That's
So
awesome.
that's my website. I also have a free gift for your audience.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's called the 10-Step Guide to Freedom. And basically it is a resource. No matter what your situation right now, you can have an epic life. No matter how bleak it looks, no matter how you feel you can't do it or you don't have the resources, there are steps you can take right in this moment to live your dream. And so that will give you some steps and some guidelines to be able to do that. And I'm happy to offer that.
Great. And how can people get that?
Well, I'm hoping you'll put it in your show notes.
I will put it in my show notes. Absolutely.
It'll be a link that they can go grab it on there. And if you go to iamfiercegrace.com, you will also have the ability, if you just want to chat with me, I'm happy to offer a free consultation and just see where you're at in life and how I can support you.
Awesome. You're so generous, and that's wonderful. I will have that link in the show notes.
Awesome.
I want to remind everyone that if you're ready to begin your epic journey, go to epicbegins.com. And as always, remember, epic choices lead to the epic life that you want.
Get your gift copy of the award-winning book, Epic Begins with One Step Forward, at epicbegins.com. That's a wrap on this episode of Epic Begins with One Step Forward with your host, Zander Sprague, best-selling author, internationally acclaimed public speaker, and licensed professional clinical counselor. To make your next conference or event epic, send an email to Zander at zander@epicbegins.com. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode. Remember, epic choices, epic life.